Who was Albert Einstein, truly? To most of the world, he is remembered as a radiant mind, a symbol of genius whose wild hair and mischievous smile became as iconic as his theory of relativity. But behind the chalkboards, behind the headlines and Nobel Prizes, lay a man of contradictions, shadows, and secrets. For decades, popular memory has painted him as the father of the atomic bomb. Yet, history tells a different story. The weapon that scarred humanity was not his direct creation, though his ideas and letters undeniably opened the door. His true legacy is far more complex, an intricate tapestry woven with dazzling scientific triumphs, turbulent personal struggles, political entanglements, and moral dilemmas that haunted him until his last breath. Einstein's story is not simply the tale of a good man or a bad man. It is the paradox of a human being who reached for the infinite but stumbled in the intimate. A man who unlocked the secrets of time and space, yet could not always navigate the fragile terrain of family and love. Imagine this: a child born with an unusually large head, doctors whispering that he might never develop normally, parents fearing for his future. From the very beginning, his existence seemed marked by strangeness, as though destiny had chosen him for a path outside the ordinary. He was slow to speak, awkward in social settings, and even suspected of mental delay. And yet, within that same child stirred a restless curiosity, an inner music that would one day rewrite the laws of the cosmos. This duality, of brilliance and fragility, of vision and imperfection, would define his entire life. Perhaps that is why the question still lingers in the minds of many. Was Einstein truly a good man? Or was he, like all of us, a complex soul caught between light and shadow? What follows is not a simple biography. It is a journey into the hidden chambers of Einstein's life, his childhood marked by doubt, his rise as a revolutionary thinker, his entanglement with politics and war, his contradictions as a father and husband, and the haunting question of legacy. Because to understand Einstein is not only to explore the universe he revealed, but also the labyrinth of the man himself. And so we begin, at the very start, with the strange and uncertain childhood of the boy who would one day bend time. The story of Einstein's childhood begins not with triumph, but with doubt. When he was born in 1879 in Ulm, Germany, doctors remarked upon his oversized head and unusual appearance. His mother endured a difficult labor, and nurses whispered that the boy might grow up with delays or disabilities. Some even predicted he would never speak properly, as if fate had placed a veil over his future. For the first few years, those whispers seemed justified. Einstein spoke little, and when he finally did, he often repeated his words softly under his breath, a habit that made others believe he was odd or slow. Family friends worried, but his mother and father quietly nurtured him. They could not have known that the very child who lagged in speech would one day give voice to the hidden structures of the universe. By the time he entered school, Einstein's contradictions were already visible. He struggled with rigid classrooms, where memorization and obedience were valued above creativity. Teachers described him as distracted, even rebellious. Yet, when confronted with mathematics and the mysteries of nature, something inside him came alive. Numbers and shapes seemed less like abstract lessons and more like keys to a secret language only he could hear. Alongside science, there was another passion that flowed through him: music. By the age of 5, he began violin lessons, reluctantly at first. But as the years passed, the violin became his companion, a bridge to a world beyond words. At 13, he discovered Mozart, and suddenly the music was no longer practice, but revelation. Friends recalled that when he played, It was as if Einstein was conversing with something invisible, tapping into harmonies that reflected both order and mystery. Music and mathematics, two languages that transcended ordinary speech, nourished the young boy's inner world. Perhaps this was how he compensated for his late start in language, by learning to speak in frequencies and formulas instead. But even as his talents blossomed, Einstein's life was not free of struggle. When his family moved to Italy, he was left behind in Munich to continue school. Alone, far from his parents, he grew restless and defiant. The educational system, with its rigid drills and harsh teachers, felt suffocating. He later confessed that such methods kill the spirit of curiosity. And indeed, young Albert resisted. He began questioning authority, refusing blind obedience, and searching for knowledge beyond the classroom walls. This stubborn streak, often mistaken as laziness, was in truth a refusal to let the fire of wonder be extinguished. Like a seed pressed deep under hard soil, Einstein endured, waiting for the right season to break through. It is here, in his early years, that the paradox of Einstein begins to reveal itself. A boy dismissed as slow, yet driven by an insatiable curiosity, a student who resisted tradition, yet carried within him the spark that would ignite a revolution in science. The world did not yet know it, but a mind was forming that would bend the very fabric of time and space. By the late 1890s, the restless boy had grown into a determined young man. At just 17, Albert Einstein graduated from secondary school in Switzerland, a country that would soon become both his refuge and his crucible. His academic record was strong, especially in mathematics and physics, where he achieved near-perfect marks. But more telling than numbers on a page was the spirit behind them, a mind unwilling to accept boundaries. Einstein enrolled at ETH Zurich, the Swiss Federal Polytechnic, one of the most prestigious institutions of its time. There, his curiosity finally found fertile ground. Yet, even in this haven of learning, he continued to clash with authority. Professors preferred discipline and tradition, while Einstein thrived on imagination and independence. He was known to skip lectures, preferring instead to study on his own or immerse himself in the writings of great thinkers like Kant, Hume, and Mach. For him, true education was never about memorizing. It was about wrestling with the universe itself. It was at ETH that he encountered Mileva Maric, a fellow student and the only woman in his physics program. Their shared passion for science sparked an intellectual bond that soon turned romantic. Mileva, brilliant in her own right, encouraged his rebellious curiosity, and together they debated ideas late into the night. Some historians believe she even contributed to his early research, though her role has remained shrouded in controversy. What is certain is that she left a mark on his life that would shape both his personal joys and his deepest regrets. Despite his brilliance, Einstein's path was far from smooth. Upon graduation, he struggled to secure a teaching post. His professors, annoyed by his disregard for authority, offered little support. For nearly 2 years, he wandered between odd jobs and moments of discouragement. It seemed as though the young man who dared to question everything had no place in the world of academia. Yet in this period of uncertainty, his resilience only deepened. He began to realize that genius is not nurtured in comfort, but forged in resistance. In a letter from those years, he hinted at a philosophy that would stay with him forever, that creativity is born not from conformity, but from freedom. Eventually, through the help of a friend's father, Einstein secured a modest position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. Though the work was unglamorous, reviewing technical designs and applications, it gave him what he needed most: stability and time to think. Every day, as he examined inventions of others, his own mind was quietly inventing a universe. He had left behind the suffocating halls of traditional education, and in their place, he created his own academy of thought. Soon, he and a small circle of friends formed what they jokingly called the Olympia Academy, a group dedicated to reading and debating science and philosophy. Within these intimate gatherings, Einstein's ideas began to crystallize. The boy once dismissed as slow was now a man sharpening the tools that would soon carve open the mysteries of space, time, and energy. The world still overlooked him. But in the silence of that obscurity, the seeds of revolution were germinating. The office in Bern, where Einstein worked, was unremarkable. Plain walls, stacks of papers, and the steady hum of bureaucracy. Yet it was here, in the quiet monotony of the Swiss patent office, that one of the greatest revolutions in human thought was born. While reviewing designs for electrical devices, Einstein's mind wandered beyond circuits and machinery. Each invention he examined was a doorway, a spark that fed his imagination. His colleagues may have seen only a modest clerk, but inside, Einstein was conducting experiments of the mind. He often said his laboratory was not filled with equipment, but with thought. What would it feel like to ride alongside a beam of light? Could time itself change depending on speed? These were not idle fantasies. They were seeds of theories that would alter the foundations of physics. During this period, Einstein and a few close friends formed a discussion circle they half-jokingly called the Olympia Academy. They met in small rooms, sharing bread, wine, and books. Together they read philosophers and scientists, from David Hume to Henri Poincaré, debating questions that reached far beyond conventional science. These conversations gave Einstein a sanctuary where ideas could collide and evolve without the constraints of academia. Then came 1905, a year now celebrated as his annus mirabilis, his miracle year. At just 26 years old, Einstein published 4 papers that would shake the very pillars of science. The first explained the mysterious behavior of particles suspended in liquid, Brownian motion, offering proof that atoms were real entities, not abstract concepts. The second addressed the photoelectric effect, revealing that light could act not only as a wave, but also as discrete packets of energy, quanta. This work would later earn him the Nobel Prize. The third introduced the special theory of relativity, redefining the relationship between space and time. For the first time, humanity was asked to imagine a universe where time itself could stretch or contract, depending on motion. And finally, his most famous equation, E = mc2, captured the breathtaking truth that mass and energy are interchangeable. A stone, a flame, a star, all were bound by the same law. In 1 year, Einstein transformed from an obscure patent clerk into a voice that challenged centuries of scientific certainty. It was as if the universe had been holding its breath, waiting for someone daring enough to rewrite its rules. Yet with each revelation came new shadows. The power of his discoveries held a double edge. The same equation that explained the stars also hinted at the unimaginable force locked inside the atom. The question was no longer whether humanity could understand the universe, but whether it was ready to wield the knowledge. Einstein's miracle year was a turning point, not only for science but for the destiny of humankind. The young patent clerk had opened a door that could never again be closed. The ripples of Einstein's miracle year spread quickly across the world of science. By 1915, he unveiled his greatest achievement, the general theory of relativity. It was no longer just about objects moving at constant speeds, but about the very fabric of space and time itself. Einstein proposed that gravity was not a mysterious force acting at a distance, as Isaac Newton had claimed centuries earlier. Instead, mass and energy bent the fabric of the universe, curving space and slowing time. To explain it, Einstein used a simple metaphor. Imagine placing a heavy ball on a stretched sheet. The ball distorts the sheet, and smaller objects roll toward it, not because they are being pulled, but because the sheet itself is curved. This radical vision redefined how we understood the cosmos. Planets, stars, galaxies, all were no longer floating in emptiness, but dancing on an invisible tapestry woven from space and time. At first, many scientists were skeptical. Such a theory required proof, and Einstein knew it. He predicted that during a solar eclipse, the sun's gravity would bend the light of distant stars, making them appear in slightly different positions in the sky. In 1919, British astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington led an expedition to observe the eclipse. His team confirmed the bending of starlight exactly as Einstein had predicted. Overnight, Einstein became a global sensation. Headlines declared him the man who had overturned Newton and revolutionized the universe. Newspapers called it a complete transformation of science. And suddenly, the quiet thinker from Bern was a celebrity. Crowds gathered just to glimpse him, as though he were not merely a scientist, but a prophet of the cosmos. Recognition soon followed. Lectures across Europe, fame in America, and in 1921, the Nobel Prize in Physics. Not for relativity, which was still considered too radical, but for his explanation of the photoelectric effect. Ironically, the discovery that earned him the prize was only one piece of his much larger vision. Yet fame brought burdens. Einstein was hailed as a genius, but with that title came expectations, scrutiny, and demands from every corner of society. His theories inspired awe, but they also unsettled the foundations of philosophy and religion. If time and space could bend, what did that say about reality itself? If energy and mass were one, what unimaginable powers might humanity unlock? In the quiet of his study, Einstein must have felt both exhilaration and unease. He had pulled back the curtain of the cosmos, only to glimpse both its beauty and its danger. For the world, his discoveries promised progress, but hidden within them lay seeds that could also yield destruction. And soon, history would call upon him not just as a thinker of stars, but as a reluctant participant in the darkest chapter of modern war. The glow of fame did not shield Einstein from the storms of history. By the 1930s, the rise of the Nazi regime had cast a shadow across Europe. As a Jewish intellectual, he became both a target of hatred and a symbol of resistance. His home in Germany was raided, his property seized, and his very name mocked in propaganda. When Adolf Hitler came to power, Einstein made a fateful decision. He would never return to his homeland. He fled first to Belgium, then to the United States, where he would eventually become a citizen. At Princeton University, he found a sanctuary for his research, but the horrors unfolding in Europe never left his thoughts. He was deeply aware that science, his life's work, could become a weapon in the hands of tyrants. In the summer of 1939, this fear crystallized. A group of fellow physicists, including the Hungarian scientist Leo Szilard, brought him grave news. German researchers were experimenting with nuclear fission. If successful, they could create a bomb of unimaginable power. The idea that Hitler might wield such a weapon was too dreadful to ignore. Einstein, along with Szilard and others, drafted a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The letter warned of the potential for Nazi Germany to develop atomic weapons and urged the United States to accelerate its own research. This letter became one of the sparks that ignited the Manhattan Project, the secret program that eventually created the first atomic bombs. Though Einstein never worked directly on the project, his name and his famous equation, E = mc2, became forever linked to it. In later years, he carried the weight of that connection like a burden he could never set down. "I made one great mistake in my life," he admitted, when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt. That mistake haunted him. While the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended a war, they also unleashed a new age of fear, an age where humanity possessed the power to destroy itself in an instant. Einstein, once celebrated as the revealer of cosmic truths, now found himself wrestling with the darkest consequences of human ambition. From that point forward, he used his voice not to champion new weapons, but to plead for peace. He warned that science without conscience was like a knife in the hand of a child, capable of both wonder and catastrophe. Together with philosopher Bertrand Russell and other thinkers, he campaigned against nuclear proliferation, urging nations to seek dialogue over destruction. But his warning fell on a world already intoxicated by power. The Cold War was beginning, and governments were racing to stockpile nuclear arsenals. Einstein's genius had opened a door to the stars, but it had also unlocked the gates of apocalypse. And as he grew older, he seemed to understand with painful clarity. Brilliance without wisdom can become humanity's undoing. Even as the shadow of nuclear weapons grew longer, Einstein refused to retreat into silence. If his discoveries had been misused, he felt a moral duty to guide the conscience of humanity. Beyond his scientific fame, he became a public voice, speaking not only of physics, but of peace, justice, and the dignity of all people. Einstein had long despised war. From his youth, he denounced the machinery of violence as a betrayal of human potential. In the 1930s, when fascism rose in Europe, he warned the world to resist, even as he himself sought refuge in America. But once the Second World War ended, his stance became firmer than ever. No more should human beings surrender their future to the madness of warlords. In the United States, he also encountered a different kind of injustice. The nation that had welcomed him as an immigrant was scarred by racism and segregation. As a Jew who had suffered persecution, Einstein recognized the same cruel logic at work, the belief that one group of humans was less than another. He joined the NAACP, supported civil rights leaders, and did not hesitate to use his reputation to challenge prejudice. When the great activist W.E.B. Du Bois was accused of communist ties, Einstein publicly defended him. He befriended the singer and activist Paul Robeson, sharing stages and petitions to denounce discrimination. To many, it was startling. The world's most famous scientist, standing not in a lecture hall, but beside those fighting for social equality. Yet for Einstein, the connection was simple. Just as he had believed that space and time were inseparable, so too were science and morality. Knowledge without justice was incomplete. This commitment to justice extended beyond America. In 1952, after the death of Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann, Einstein was offered the presidency of Israel itself. The proposal astonished him, and for a moment the world held its breath. Would the great scientist now become a head of state? Einstein declined. "I have neither the natural ability nor the experience to deal with human beings properly," he confessed. His realm was not politics, but principles, and yet, even in refusal, he used the moment to speak of his deepest hope, that Jews and Arabs might one day share a land in peace rather than in blood. Einstein's voice was not always welcomed. Some dismissed him as naive, others criticized his socialist leanings. He praised freedom, but also cautioned against the worship of unchecked capitalism. He celebrated democracy, but warned that nationalism of any kind could become a poison. He once wrote, "Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind." Through all of this, his guiding star was not ideology, but humanity. He saw science, politics, and society not as separate spheres, but as threads in one great tapestry. If one thread was poisoned, the whole fabric could unravel. Yet even as he sought to inspire, Einstein carried within him contradictions. His ideals often shone brighter in public than in his private life, a paradox that would become clearer in the shadows of his personal story. Because while he stood as a champion for the oppressed, at home, those closest to him often felt neglected, wounded, or betrayed. Behind the brilliance and the public image of moral authority, Einstein's private life told a far more turbulent story. If the world saw him as a prophet of peace, his family often knew him as a man of distance, pride, and contradiction. His first great love was Mileva Maric, a fellow student at ETH Zurich and one of the few women in Europe studying physics at the time. Their bond was intellectual as much as emotional. Together they debated theories, exchanged ideas, and dreamed of a shared future in science. Some historians even argue that Mileva quietly contributed to the early drafts of Einstein's groundbreaking work. Yet her name was never attached to the papers that made him famous. Before they married, Mileva gave birth in secret to a daughter, Liesl, whose fate remains one of the unsolved mysteries in Einstein's life. Some accounts suggest the child died of illness. Others whisper she was given up for adoption. In either case, Einstein never spoke publicly of her, and her absence lingered as a silent wound in their story. Eventually, Einstein and Mileva married and had 2 sons, Hans Albert and Eduard. At first, the family seemed to embody the dream of a brilliant couple raising the next generation. But Einstein's growing fame and restless nature soon eroded the marriage. He engaged in an affair with his cousin, Elsa Löwenthal, and when Mileva confronted him, his response was chillingly pragmatic. He offered a list of conditions under which he would stay in the marriage. Among them, Mileva was to serve his meals, remain silent when he wished, and never expect affection. It was less a proposal of reconciliation than a contract of dominance. Mileva refused, and the marriage collapsed. Einstein later married Elsa, the cousin who had become his confidant and mistress. While she provided companionship and stability, their relationship too was marked by his emotional distance. He devoted himself to his work, often at the cost of those who loved him most. His children bore the deepest scars. Hans Albert pursued a career in engineering, but Einstein dismissed his choice as uninspired, calling it a meager profession. Their relationship was strained for decades, though later softened with age. Eduard, the younger son, was gifted in literature and aspired to be a psychiatrist, but he suffered from severe mental illness and spent much of his life in institutions. Einstein, unable to face his son's suffering, distanced himself, sending money but rarely visiting. "Perhaps I am not cut out to be a father," he once admitted in despair. The contradictions were stark. A man who championed equality and compassion on the world stage, yet failed to offer warmth to those in his own home. A genius who unraveled the mysteries of the cosmos, yet could not solve the fragile equation of love and responsibility. These shadows do not erase his brilliance, but they remind us that even the greatest minds are bound by human weakness. Einstein's life was not the story of a saint, but of a man who could illuminate the universe while stumbling in the dark corridors of his own heart. And as the years passed, those shadows grew heavier, until Einstein found himself in his final chapter, alone, aging, and facing the ultimate mystery that no equation could master: death. By the early 1950s, the fire of youth had faded, but Einstein's spirit remained restless. His hair, once wild with vitality, had become the very image of eccentric genius. Yet behind those weary eyes lived a man haunted by time itself. He had spent his life redefining the fabric of the universe, But now he found himself face to face with the one mystery even he could not bend to reason: mortality. In April 1955, while living in Princeton, Einstein suffered an internal hemorrhage caused by the rupture of his abdominal aorta. Doctors offered surgery, but he refused. "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially," he told them. "I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." These were not the words of resignation, but of acceptance, a final act of clarity from a man who had always sought truth, even in endings. On the night of April 17th, he was taken to Princeton Hospital. The next morning, as dawn broke, Albert Einstein breathed his last at the age of 76. The world awoke to headlines announcing the death of the man who had bent time and space to his will. Crowds gathered, journalists wept, and nations mourned. Yet in his will, Einstein had asked for no grand monument, no marble tomb. His body was cremated, and his ashes scattered in secret, so that no shrine would rise in his name. He wished, above all, to be remembered for ideas, not idols. But the story did not end there. Against the family's wishes, the attending pathologist, Dr. Thomas Harvey, removed Einstein's brain and preserved it. He claimed it was for scientific study, though for decades it traveled from lab to lab, a relic both revered and controversial. Even in death, Einstein's mind, literally, became the subject of fascination, as if the secret to genius could be dissected under a microscope. Yet no analysis could explain the mystery of his brilliance. His true legacy was not in the tissue of his brain, but in the ideas that reshaped humanity's vision of reality. In those final years, Einstein had grown increasingly reflective. He saw science racing ahead, but feared that morality lagged behind. "The splitting of the atom changed everything," he warned, "except our way of thinking." To his friends, he confided that he had lived many contradictions: pacifist and warner, genius and flawed father, visionary and exile. But in the end, he wanted only one thing: that the world learn to live in peace. His death was not the closing of a book, but the turning of a page. Generations after him still debate his theories, wrestle with his contradictions, and draw inspiration from his words. For Einstein himself, perhaps death was simply a return to what he once described: the wave folding back into the ocean, the spark returning to the eternal field of consciousness. He had shown humanity that time was relative, that energy and matter were one, and that the universe was far more mysterious than anyone had dared to imagine. In his final silence, he left behind not only equations, but a question. Will we use knowledge to destroy or to awaken? The story of Albert Einstein does not end with his passing. It continues to ripple through the centuries like a stone cast into a vast and timeless sea. His name became a synonym for genius, yet his life revealed a truth far more complex. Greatness is never without shadow. He was a man of contradictions, prophet of peace who indirectly ushered in the nuclear age, champion of humanity who faltered in his closest relationships, seeker of truth who admitted that mystery would always remain. To some, Einstein was the last of the great scientific visionaries, a bridge between the age of Newton and the age of quantum fields. To others, he was a moral voice in an age torn by violence, reminding the world that science must serve humanity, not enslave it. And to those who look deeper, he stands as a symbol of our shared paradox, that the same mind capable of unlocking the stars can also stumble in the realm of love, family, and the simple duties of compassion. What, then, is his true legacy? Not just relativity, nor e-Ponagar's MC2, nor even the countless technologies built on his insights. His greatest gift may be the reminder that the universe is not fixed, but fluid, shaped by perspective, infused with mystery, and sustained by consciousness itself. Einstein urged us to look beyond what can be measured and to honor what can only be felt: wonder, unity, and the fragile beauty of existence. He once wrote, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science." In those words, we glimpse the essence of his spirit. Not a man obsessed with formulas, but a soul attuned to the sacred harmony that binds the cosmos. As we reflect on his journey, we are reminded that knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, and power without compassion is destructive. Einstein's life warns us that every discovery carries responsibility, that every equation echoes in the moral fabric of the world. Yet it also invites us to dream boldly, to question deeply, and to remember that, in the end, the measure of our lives is not in the theories we prove, but in the humanity we preserve. Einstein's ashes scattered in the wind were no end, but a metaphor. Like stardust, like thought itself, he returned to the continuum he had spent his life studying. The man is gone, but the questions remain. Questions that whisper through every lab, every classroom, every sleepless night when we look up at the stars and wonder. Was he a good man? Was he a flawed man? Perhaps both, as we all are. What is certain is that he was a mirror, a reminder that within each of us lies the potential to destroy or to illuminate, to divide or to unite, to live asleep or to awaken. And maybe that was Einstein's final teaching, that the universe, in all its vastness, reflects not only the laws of physics, but the choices of our hearts. The future is not written in the stars. It is written in us.